The crude oil market has been a topic of discussion in recent times, especially now that local refining initiatives are gaining traction. The emergence of significant players in the oil sector has sparked debates about political dynamics that influence the sector. Experts are of the position that the path forward requires careful considerations of regulatory frameworks, industry collaboration, and a commitment to fostering sustainable and competitive local refining environment. Let's get into the discussion, and I'm being joined by an energy lawyer. He's also an energy analyst, Dr. Ayodele Oni. He joins me from Lekki, Lagos. Good afternoon, Dr. Oni, and it's really good to have you join the program at this time. I think you need to unmute yourself. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's good to be here again.
Dr. Oni, I think we should start this conversation this way. There's been this back and forth from all angles, you know, government, private sector, and all of that. But let me ask you specifically, what do you make of this issue, talking about local refining, movement of crude to the Dangote refinery, and all of this back and forth that we've had in recent times, before we go into some specifics that have been highlighted during this conversation?
Okay, someone said something that if you understand Nigeria, then they haven't explained it well enough to you. Anyway, that's just a joke. I think that it depends on who you speak to and who you ask. My own personal views are that whatever we do, we should ensure that the security of energy supply, we should ensure that there is a prosperity in the land, and we should ensure that whilst there's competition, which is a good thing, we should protect our investors, particularly those who are investing substantial sums, risk capital. No one wants to invest $20 billion plus and face regulatory and other challenges. So whatever it is, I believe that the President and the Minister of Petroleum are doing a lot to ensure that there is progress. Business people can do their businesses without any let or hindrance, and that there is reasonable security of energy supply and security of energy demand. Both are important to us as a country, that people continue to buy our crude, and we also have crude available and finished products.
Let me follow up that very point you've made, talking about energy security. Is it appropriate for a country to depend on just maybe one source to address energy supply across the country? Is it ideal for a country to depend solely on one source when it comes to energy supply across the country?
Okay, generally speaking, that would seem like a trick question, but generally speaking, it depends on how you look at it, because when you even speak to energy, they are natural monopolies, right? If the barrier to entry is very high, it's going to be very difficult for you to then say you can't have a monopoly or an oligopoly. That said, for security of energy supply, you always expect that you've got multiple sources, generally speaking. And in the case of Nigeria, you've got a number of modular refineries. You've also got NNPC's refineries, which we expect will be working. So I don't think, with respect to petroleum products, you can really be speaking to monopoly, unless, of course, there's information you and I are not privy to. And, you know, you always want to look at also the principle of absolute and comparative advantage when you speak to issues generally. Are you better off importing? Are you better off doing it yourself? Is there comparative advantage? Do you have, as a country, comparative advantage producing one product as opposed to something else? You know, these are issues you need to take a critical look at. And, you know, to be able to answer certain questions more specifically, you need to be aware of all the facts. So I do not want to guess. I do not want to make statements I'm not completely sure about. But specifically, you want to ensure that you have numerous energy sources.
But the PIA also encourages that players must get into the market. It should be attractive for private guys to be able to also invest in this market, particularly, I think, the downstream segment.
Okay, yeah, so that's important. If you look at what the PIA does, unlike what we had in the Petroleum Act, you have the PIA doing a lot, making a lot of copious provisions around midstream and downstream, and as to those who can get licenses around whether you want to import products, and it speaks to refining and those who have license for refinery for you to even be able to do certain things. I think part of our challenges is that we've not operationalized the PIA as we should. You know, the number of provisions, and if you want to do that, maybe you don't also have to look at the political economy, because if you want to, for example, completely remove subsidy, and it's my view that we still do have subsidy to an extent, right? It might be minimal compared to what we used to have. If you remove subsidy completely, then people are going to suffer. Products are going to be completely very, very expensive, and it's easy to extrapolate. Look at what you'd buy fuel at the pumps in Canada, for example, in Toronto. I think I was in Toronto 2 months ago for an event, and I think it was almost $2. Whether it was $1.70 or something per liter, if I recall very well. So if it's that expensive, then you assume that Nigeria will be around that, maybe slightly cheaper, say $1 plus, because we've got energy, we've got fuel that they've got oil sands largely anyway, you know, compared to what we've got. Ours is cheaper. So should be cheaper here, but it will still be around 1,900 to 1,200. So I think that ultimately what you want to see is to ensure that we make progress as a nation and we have energy security. I think ultimately that's what you want to see. Access is important.
Well, the issue of competition now in this market, some are alleging that there's a bit of stifling when it comes to competition in that market. That is like they are not opening up for other guys to be able to compete in this market, which should be a market that there should be a level playing ground. How would you also react to that? And let me add to that question. What do we talk about bad diesel or fuel coming into the country? How do we check things like this? So it's a two-in-one question.
Okay, so I think that already. For your second question, with respect to fuel coming into the country, the Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority does have the responsibility, well stated and spelled out in the Petroleum Industry Act, in relation to testing, ensuring that you have the right specs coming to the country. You know, there are specifications as to octane levels. If you go abroad, you'll see that there are like 3 specs when you go to the filling station. And for certain cars, if you drive an S-Class, a GLS, certain cars, they'll tell you it has to be the one with 92% octane or something, you know, and then it goes down. In the country, we should have rules, we should have standards. Those standards should be enforced. It's not sufficient to have rules. The Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority must be seen to be neutral. The authority must be seen to have the capacity to do what it's empowered to do under the Petroleum Industry Act. If it doesn't have the capacity to do what it's empowered to do, you continue to have these challenges. There have been allegations of not having right equipment and all of that. I do not have those facts, so I cannot directly speak to it. But I know it's their responsibility, and, you know, unless it can be shown that they are not complying with the rules, I do think ultimately the ball or the issue stop at their desk. Can you come again with your first question? I missed that bit.
I'm talking about competition now in that market. Okay. Some say that there is no space for that level of competition that is expected, considering the positives that should come from the PIA.
Okay, so the interesting thing is that if you know there's no competition, then the question is who is to blame? We do have a number of refineries. Some were sold and taken back. You'd hear allegations of billions or trillions of naira spent on revamping those refineries. There are 4 government-owned refineries. I expect that with time they start to work. I mean, there have been a number of postponements. I do hope that this final postponement will be the last, and then those will continue to work. I'm aware that BUA is working on a refinery. I know that there are a few modular refineries. 1 or 2 of them are also I also do work for. So I'm not sure there isn't some form of competition, and I'm not sure that in the very near term there won't be substantial competition. And I'm also not of the view that when you speak to competition, and one thing we need to take into consideration is that if for the barriers to entry, you would naturally at times see what appears to be monopolies. We just need to have strong laws and regulations to ensure that there isn't market abuse, right? So if there isn't competition in the immediate, I'm sure in the next few weeks or months, as soon as those refineries, if there is substantial competition, because I think there is competition, especially with the number of modular refineries we have. Once those four refineries come on stream, then the complaint around not having competition wouldn't be a thing. And besides, I understand that there's still the importation of petroleum products. If you produce items that are cheaper, they are higher quality or same quality as what you find internationally, then I doubt that you can really complain. If the quality is as good as what you find internationally and it's cheaper, you don't even need to tell people. Most people are going to gravitate towards what is homemade, that is cheaper and the same quality as what you find internationally. No one wants to spend extra, particularly for mass products such as petroleum products. No one is going to want to buy something that is more expensive if the quality is the same.
Something also,
because there's really no differentiation, right?
Something very important here, Dr. Oni, is also crude production. And at the moment, we know the level at which we are, within 1,200 to 1,300, or not even up to OPEC quota. Government is trying to ramp up production. You know, all security agencies are on the ground to try to address this. So what is even on ground? How? And their commitments already, according to what we've read and research that we've made. So how do you see all of this leveling up? I think the ultimate game changer here will be to increase production.
Oh, yes. Production is critical because recall that refining is adding value to a base resource. Without crude, you can't have refined product because you are refining that crude. Now, the challenge with our crude production is quite historical. Some of it is from raising financing. IOCs, everyone does raise financing. You have reserve-based lending. You have forward sale arrangements where you forward sell your crude, which you haven't even produced. You borrow money to be able to develop your asset and produce crude much more than what you'll be paying back. So I understand over time, in some cases, I'd say I was involved in working on some of those transactions in the past. There's been forward sale. Companies do it, and I also understand that. I'm also aware the NNPC has done that a number of times. So it's understandable, but I expect that there'll be planning, and that's where we usually fail in this part of the world. Planning for the future, understanding what the dynamics are. If there are contracts to supply a quantum, say for force majeure and a number of other situations, you want to ensure that you can fulfill your obligations to supply that crude. If we do not resolve the crude production issue, we'll continue to have this challenge because we then have to import import crude. I recall I started by saying that if you understand Nigeria, people have made that a joke, then they've not explained it well enough to you. Because some would say at some point our complaint was that we could not add value to the crude by refining. Now we have refineries, we do not have substantial crude. So I think something needs to be done, and I understand the presidency is doing quite a bit, and the Ministry of Petroleum Resources is doing quite a bit to ensure that there can be more production. I think a few hours ago, there was news filtering in that Owando's acquisition has been approved, consent has been received, and that's good. You know, we should get same for Seplat and the ExxonMobil deal. People should be allowed to then risk capital because anyone who wants to sell an asset is not going to continue to pump money into it. So I suspect the Exxon isn't going to be pumping new money. You know, a number of these companies, I think it was Total that done some investment around non-associated gas recently, also because of the NLNG, for example. So a lot is happening around gas, particularly because of the LNG play, right? But we need to do more in terms of production. Some of these efforts by government needs to push and see things through. You know, people do not care about efforts. People usually want to see results. Whilst I cannot blame this administration completely because many of these issues are historical, and these start from now. but government needs, I mean, the president will tell you he applied for this job. So it just has to find a way around it. And we just need to succeed in terms of ramping up production. And part of it is ensuring that consent is obtained very quickly. And it was reasonably done, fairly reasonably done in the Orlando deal. It came pretty quickly compared to what we had seen historically.
I'm excited with the fact that you said these are historic issues. Nigerians need to understand that all of this has been on ground before now. And all the government is trying to do is to address these issues squarely, holistically, not just in bits like it's been done before now. But I'm going to ask you, and almost a final question, I guess. Also in the PIA, there is a segment that allows the NNPC to be the supplier of last resort, which is what has been happening for some time. We're having issues with the FX scarcity and the high rates of FX. The NNPC has been doing that. So what would you say with regards to that? And when, that's like a tall order, but when do you think marketers would have that capacity to start to also import on their own?
Okay, I think it's a number of things. First, it's true that the PIA does state that the NNPCL is a supplier of last resort when you do have challenges. Because energy security, you need to guarantee your energy security, particularly where you're a country that does have these resources. Why should you then suffer? Why should you then suffer from security of energy supply? You know, it shouldn't be the case that we suffer. That's why you have a national oil company, which, whilst it should be commercially run, there'll be situations where there'll be those exceptions. Now, that's one. In terms of free market, if you don't remove subsidy completely, you will still continue to have this challenge. Now, that's on one hand. The effect is on another hand. I always say that when you deal with issues in the energy sector, we cannot deal with those in isolation. So many other issues come up. I think, for example, if we had power supply 24 hours and the power sector is strong, the electric power sector is strong, we're not going to make a lot of hue and cry over the cost of petroleum products, because I don't have to fuel my generator every day. I don't even, maybe never have to fuel it because I have power supply. If you have infrastructure around transportation, it then means that I don't need to drive my car for 3, 4, 5 hours if I live in, say, Crude and I work on the island. I just get my car on a seagoing vehicle for 10, 15 minutes, and I get to the other side and I drive for another 5 minutes to my office. I wouldn't care so much about the cost of fuel, but as long as we have to self-generate, so you cannot deal with petroleum product issues in isolation. That said, so one, if subsidy isn't removed, people are not going to want to invest, because then they need to wait, and then the issues around corruption, uncertainty around forex. So if I get my forex for X amount, I go get it. It leads to competition. If someone gets it cheaper, people are able to invest, and they're able to add a margin to whatever it is they've been able to buy. It's simple market, right? But for that to work and not create chaos in the industry, and not lead to the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria calling for crisis, so to speak, you then need to ensure that other segments of the economy are well catered to. Electricity, infrastructure for transportation, I think that those are also critical. And then our reliance on petroleum products will drop substantially. And if I was using 100 liters a week before, I might be using 5 liters or less. So it doesn't affect me in terms of my cost outlay periodically.
Dr. Ayodele, I must thank you so much for your time, for your insight into this topic of discourse. Energy lawyer, analyst. Thank you. Do enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you for having me.
All right, there. Coming up next on the show, we shift our focus to discuss economic challenges facing businesses and the role of the private sector. The president of the Nigerian Employers Consultative Association, Dr. Ifeanyi Okoye, joins me live from Enugu